26 applicants have shown their interest to apply for the new bank license. Let's stay with that story and let's discuss at length and get you a complete 360-degree view on how life will change for Indian banking system and what could be the considerations what could be the methodology which Reserve Bank of India could consider to award new banks. To do that, let me bring on board Maithili Bhushan Math. She's consulting editor with Economic Times. Along with him, Nirmal Jain, chairman at IIFL. Santosh Singh, he represents Espirito Santo Securities. And Rajiv Takru, banking secretary. Maithili, let me kickstart the discussion with you. And Maithili, if I look at the list of the applicants which have shown interest in the new banking license, unusual names: Department of Post, Tourism Corporation of India.
Well, Department of Post had always expressed an interest, and the key thing was that, we have such massive spread all over the country. We are in all the areas that you say are unbanked, and if the government's claim is that we're looking at financial inclusion, we want to increase the coverage, why, we're the best fit. So that's always been Department of Post claim, and in fact, they have always been talking earlier also in the past about the need to convert themselves into a bank. And if you look at the Japanese experience, the German experience, the post office in these two countries has been a very important player in the financial sector as a bank. So India Post has considered itself best fit. Whether the RBI agrees with that interpretation remains to be seen. Tourism Corporation, yes, Finance Corporation is a little bit of a surprise, and frankly I'm not sure they stand a very good chance. But as far as India Post is concerned, they were always in the game, but given the fact that they are a government department, it has been a fairly low-key kind of statement.
Mr. Takru, 26 applications have come in. Are these in line with what you were expecting, or were you expecting more?
I don't think that's a fair question. As far as we are concerned, everybody who satisfies the guidelines has an equal chance, and they would all be evaluated on merits. It's not that if you fall in a particular category, you're going to get any kind of a preference whatsoever.
But Mr. Takru, but you've said rules should not be changed once the game has begun. But many applicants have sought relaxation in the norms for NBFCs, especially on CRR and SLR front. Rules have been relaxed in the past. You still believe there is no scope for rethink, at least this time around?
I think there are two different aspects here. One, whether there is any merit in the argument. Second, what should be done. I do not want to get into the merit of the argument for the simple reason that all arguments have merit, provided which side of the fence you're on. So I don't think I want to get involved in that kind of argument, which is largely based on one's own subjective evaluation of one's own reality. So that's one. Now coming to the point about changing the rules of the game, I am very clear that, and I think this is universally accepted generally, that once a game begins, as I mentioned yesterday, you don't change the rules midway. So once there are certain guidelines and once there are certain specifications which have been laid out in the guidelines, you surely don't expect midway in the process any kind of a relaxation on that, because that would be very unfair to those people who did not apply because of the stipulations of the guidelines, and that would completely actually vitiate the process. So I would advise that although there's no law which says that you can't hope, people can keep hoping, but I would sincerely advise that if they are serious about being accepted, they may like to consider, they have 18 months after they are accepted, if they are accepted, and they may sincerely like to consider adjusting to the guidelines and conforming to them, because I think that's going to be the only way anybody is going to get a license.
Mr. Jain, if I can just bring you in over here and ask you, so far we've seen only one NBFC which got a bank license. So what do you think are the challenges for NBFCs? Is it particularly more difficult for NBFCs given that the prudential guidelines, capital adequacy, provisioning norms, they're all quite different for NBFCs. It's a totally different ball game. So what are the particular challenges for NBFCs to become a successful bank?
I think in the last 15 years NBFCs have grown significantly in terms of size as well as their reach and the last mile connectivity with customer, and therefore their ability to deliver on financial inclusion. The challenges are there. I think there's a cost to get a bank license, because no forbearance on CRR, SLR would mean that profitability will dip, and at least it will take 3 to 4 years to recover. But I think players who are long term, and they will look at least 10 to 15 years as if they want to enter into banking arena. So in a way, guidelines are fair. They're strict, but I don't think there's anything which is something which is very wrong, or something which needs immediate correction. I think they have been very well thought through. RBI's explanations are very detailed and very clear, not leaving anything to chance and making it very objective. So as far as we are concerned, we have applied with no exceptions, and we have said that we'll comply in toto. In terms of our profitability projections, it means that our bank will get to profitability maybe 5 years or 4-5 years later to the level it was at NBFC just before converting. But I think that's part of the game, and that's the cost to get into a much bigger orbit of growth.
Santosh, if I could just ask you a question over here. We've just heard Nirmal Jain say that it'll take them about 4 or 5 years at the minimum to become profitable. But as per the guidelines, banks are required to list within 3 years. Now, will they be able to list? We've seen in the insurance sector that the insurance companies just have not been able to list because they've not been able to make profits. So do banks stand a chance? How will they be able to list? SEBI guidelines are there, and will anybody buy?
See, if we are comparing banks with the insurance company, the reasoning is different. In case of insurance, it's the FDI which is creating problem for the insurance companies. At the same time, the environment has not been good. But if I'm looking at the banking sector, and if at all in 3 years these guys want to list, I think and if the banks which are seen as a good entity. So if these companies are able to show to the market that they have been able to do something or achieve something in 3 years, then definitely I think the listing requirement is possible. Listing can be done actually, and market will be willing to accept those sort of listings. I don't think there will be any problem with on the listing side. My concerns have been different with the banking license rather than the listing requirements actually.
Mr. Thakur, do you think it will be tough for LIC Housing Finance to convert into a NOFHC structure, and also LIC Housing Finance is a niche player in the housing infra space? How beneficial will a bank license be for an NBFC company?
This is the corporate decision of the entity itself, and well, they must have thought of something, I am sure. I don't need to apply my mind on what somebody else has thought.
Mr. Thakur, but does it make sense for an India Post to apply for a banking license? I mean, what expertise does a post office staff have for banking?
Well, I think the answer I just gave applies here as well. But you seem to be pulling down the post office substantially. I don't think the post offices have been around doing savings and taking deposits and so on for ages. So it's not that they have no expertise in the matter, but I'm sure they must have thought of something. I believe they have prepared a project report through a professional consultant, and they have gone about it rather professionally. So I'm sure the Reserve Bank of India will consider their application and give it the same consideration which anybody else gets. And they have to be, of course, in conformity with the guidelines.
Nirmal, this question is coming your way, and let me gently guide you back to your earlier comments. Of course, there is merit in why an NBFC should become a bank, and that will only help and muscle your distribution as well as your reach. But does it make sense for IIFL to really, dilute their balance sheet to get, challenged or get, marred by norms of CRR and SLR and priority sector going forward?
I think it makes abundant sense, because going forward, if you look at next 10 years, NBFCs are dependent on wholesale borrowings, and you can't grow beyond a size, or if you grow, it's going to become increasingly challenging for NBFCs to raise money, and particularly in an environment where RBI has taken a stance that NBFCs should not be overly dependent on public funds or wholesale sources. And a company like ours that has got 2,000 branches all across the country in addition to 2,000 sub-brokers. So we're already there in Tier 3, Tier 4. We're already there in 20-kilometer vicinity of Tier 5, 6. And I personally look at this as an opportunity, because the rural and semi-urban India is just growing faster than what it has been historically. And I think this is a great opportunity to tap the market, which is much bigger, much wider and vast across the country.
Maithili, what is your sense on how the NOFHC structure is going to shape up in terms of names like an LIC? Because that really seems to be a sticky point, it being a parent company.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of difficult for all the players, because this is a new structure which has not been not been seen in India so far, and the whole idea of the RBI was to ring fence the bank and to ensure that in case there is a problem in any other subsidiary or any other associate of the promoter group, this will not impinge on the bank. So the RBI basically will be experimenting. We still haven't seen the structure, and in fact even for the existing banks there is the RBI's idea that even the existing banks should move to this structure. So the whole thing is still rather uncharted territory, but it will be difficult for all the players, particularly for government departments, which is what India Post is at the moment. LIC Housing is a public sector entity, part of the LIC group, so it's going to be pretty challenging for all the players, and even more so perhaps for the public sector ones.
Nirmal, hypothetically, let's say if you get a bank license, how will life change for you next 6 months?
Hello?
Nirmal, I'm making a hypothetical situation.
Yes.
And the hypothetical case here is, let's say if you get a bank license. If you get a bank license, how will life change for you in next 6 months?
No, life will change, but in fact just one small correction. We'll be profitable in year 1. I only said that our profitability will dip. So last year, like we reported 280 crores of post-tax profit. If we were to convert to a bank, it might become half of it in the first year, but it'll recover. Life will change dramatically because banking is a huge responsibility, and it always comes with tremendous, it's completely different ball game when you are taking public deposit in terms of governance, in terms of public expectations, shareholders' expectations, as well as regulatory environment. So I think historically, as you've seen, our company has changed many avatars, from a .com to broking to a NBFC. So I think this will be another challenge, and I think it will be worth it.
Mr. Thakur, what happened to Women's Bank that was being spoken about in the budget?
Women's Bank is very much on track. We have received in principle approval from RBI, and we are now in the process of incorporating it. And hopefully, all going well, I think we are on track. We should have everything in place. Some premises have also been located in various cities, and hopefully we should be able to do the inauguration by November as promised.
Nirmal, you just spoke about the fact that you are fairly confident that you will be able to meet all the obligations that a banking license requires. But everybody's been talking by and large of CRR, SLR, priority sector, and unbanked centers, opening rural branches. But there's also this huge difference in the guidelines as far as provisioning is concerned. NBFCs were up in arms when we had the Yuksha Thara committee recommending that you move from 180 days to 90 days. So all NBFCs were quite unanimous. It is very difficult for them. It's going to be a huge impact on their bottom line. So if you become a bank, so apart from all the other obligations that I listed, this will also make a huge difference, additional provisional requirements. Will 18 months be enough for you to do that?
All NBFCs have different product portfolios. So we have a diversified mix, and I think the impact will be a lot more for, say, companies that are in commercial vehicles or in the consumer finance kind of businesses, but impact will not be that significant for companies that have a larger asset from mortgages or home loans, because there I think the difference between 90 days and 180 days is not significant. So I think it will vary from NBFC to NBFC, and what RBI or Usha Thorat committee's recommendations seem to be going the way, at least my understanding is, they'll be done in a phased manner. So they are trying to bring it at par with banks, and this will be done over a period of 2 to 3 years. So it won't be an immediate thing. So maybe 180 days will become 150, 120, and 90. That will be a more, I think that kind of calibrated approach will help NBFCs to get adjusted to these kind of norms. But there's merit in the argument that some NBFCs businesses, the way they are, these kind of provisioning norms can basically be very difficult and can actually make them recover loans at a much faster pace, and that may not be good for small consumers that they service.
Santosh, we've seen 2 or 3 applicants who are heavily into the infrastructure area. Given the fact that infrastructure is a sore need in the country, and in fact the government has been trying very hard to find new players in the infrastructure space, and we also know that banks and infrastructure financing are not a good fit because banks are essentially the short term. Would it be wise to allow these 3 players to move into banking when we actually want them to remain maybe focused on infrastructure?
So some of the reasonings, if you see why infrastructure companies wants to become a bank, the reasonings are that, earlier the problem was that for an NBFC the problem was liability. But today for an infrastructure finance company the problem is finding good assets. Because clearly the way our economy is moving, it's getting very difficult to find good assets and finance. So the problem is that you cannot grow your asset book so fast. And hence these infrastructure companies wants to diversify. So from their point of view, it makes total sense that they want to diversify because they are not getting enough opportunities in the current economic environment. But if I'm looking from a broader perspective, maybe from an economy perspective, I think it makes quite a lot of sense to have infrastructure finance companies because we have seen that the banks have got their ALM mismatches and hence they are not able to do this business properly. So from a broader economy perspective, it makes sense. But from the infrastructure finance companies perspective, for them also today it makes sense to diversify and become a bank.
Santosh, out of the 26 applicants which have applied for the new banking license, about 12 or 13 entities are listed. Yeah. Not everyone will get a bank license. Yeah. So for those who will not get a bank license, do you think markets are likely to punish those stocks?
First and foremost, I have not been able to understand why market has been so bullish on some of the companies based on the banking license. Because first and foremost, it's not going to be very easy to get converted into a bank and become profitable with the sort of businesses they have. So I have not been able to understand that. But at the same time, if those companies have gone up just because of the banking license, it's bound to happen that those companies will fall also if they are not able to get the banking license. But some of the businesses, if I'm looking at LIC Housing Finance or Bajaj Finserv or even an ABNL, these businesses in isolation also are worth more than what they are trading at as of today. So I don't think there is valuation mismatch in many of the businesses. In some of the businesses, yes, definitely there is a valuation mismatch. But in most of the businesses, I don't find a lot of valuation mismatch.
Santosh, you're talking about Bajaj Finserv, Aditya Birla Nuvo, LIC Housing Finance. The IIFL chairman is on the other side. I was hoping you would have said IIFL is also a strong contender.
I cannot talk about who is strong contender, who is not strong contender as of today, because it's now everyone has applied, and in our view, if it's a diversified company, if it's a strong lending base, we find them more strong contenders. So something like a L&T Finance or something like a Bajaj, we find them more strong contenders than others. But today, as of today, everyone has applied, and hence everyone stands the same chance, I think.